In the mid-1700s, Lisbon was one of the richest cities on earth. Gold flowed in from Brazil, and ships from every corner of the known world packed its harbor. Magnificent churches, opulent palaces, and bustling markets filled the hills overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. It was a city of immense faith, power, and unshakable confidence, a place that believed it stood under divine protection. No one living there could possibly imagine that, in the space of a single morning, Lisbon would be almost completely erased from the map, or that its destruction would shake not just the ground, but the very beliefs of all of Europe. It was November 1st, 1755, All Saints' Day, a deeply significant holy day. Thousands of people filled Lisbon's grand churches. Candles burned on every altar. Families gathered to pray. The city was calm, ordinary, and peaceful. Then, without any warning, the ground beneath Lisbon began to move. At around 9:40 in the morning, one of the most powerful earthquakes in European history struck. The ground heaved so violently that entire streets split apart. The ornate ceilings of churches collapsed directly onto the worshippers below. Massive stone buildings crumbled like they were made of sand. The shaking lasted for what felt like an eternity for those trapped inside the falling structures. By the time it finally stopped, tens of thousands were already dead, and the worst was still to come. Survivors fled from the ruined city center toward the waterfront, believing the open space along the river would save them. But there they watched in confusion as the ocean suddenly and mysteriously pulled back, exposing the harbor floor littered with lost cargo and old shipwrecks. Then they heard a sound like rolling thunder. A massive tsunami, perhaps 20 meters high, surged into the city. Ships were thrown onto the streets. People were swept away in seconds. The sea destroyed what the earthquake had spared. But the catastrophe wasn't over. The earthquake and tsunami had knocked over thousands of candles from the All Saints' Day services, along with countless cooking fires. Soon, flames erupted all across the ruins. Strong winds fanned the blaze, pushing it through the narrow, debris-choked streets and turning what was left of Lisbon into a raging inferno. The fires burned for 5 full days. Anyone trapped beneath the rubble had no chance of survival. By the end, nearly the entire city lay in ashes. An estimated 60,000 people were killed. About 85% of Lisbon's buildings were completely destroyed. Palaces vanished. Priceless libraries burned. Entire neighborhoods simply ceased to exist. One of Europe's greatest cities was reduced to rubble before noon. Portugal's king survived, but he was never the same. Terrified of buildings, he refused to live indoors ever again. For the rest of his life, the royal court ruled from a complex of tents and wooden pavilions set up in the hills outside the ruined city. Lisbon was broken, and so was its sense of divine certainty. Across Europe, people asked a terrifying question. How could such a horrifying disaster strike a deeply faithful city on its most holy day? Thinkers like Voltaire used the event to question whether the world was truly guided by a just and benevolent God. The Lisbon disaster helped ignite the Age of Enlightenment, shifting European thought toward science, reason, and skepticism. This wasn't just a destroyed city, it was a destroyed worldview. Lisbon was eventually rebuilt, but it was never the same. Wide, straight streets replaced the tangled medieval alleys. New buildings were designed using innovative techniques to survive future earthquakes. It became one of the first cities in history to be rebuilt using modern scientific principles of disaster planning. From utter destruction came a new way of thinking. In one morning, Lisbon lost its people, its wealth, and its certainty. But the shock waves of that day reached far beyond Portugal. They changed how humanity understood nature, faith, and reason itself. Lisbon wasn't just destroyed. It changed the course of history. If you enjoy true history, subscribe for more stories the past tried to bury.